Hi, everybody. Welcome into Sports Talk Chicago. My name's Jon Zaghloul. Great to have you here on Channel 59.3 BPOD TV and Roku. Big news. Will Nick Foles be traded? There's been some indications, but will it actually happen? We'll break it all down in just a second. Before we get started, make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Z Sports and on Facebook at Jon Zaghloul. You want to watch more of this show? Search up Sports Talk Chicago, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and sportstalkchicago.com. For you to watch more shows from the BPOD TV network, search up BPOD TV on YouTube. I want to start today with this. I've heard your pleas about Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. John, stop talking about him. Who cares? New regime, new team, new direction. Focus on the positive. And for the most part, I'd like to think that I have. Haven't talked too much about Ryan Pace or Matt Nagy since the firings. But unfortunately, there comes a time where you're forced to talk about them. Where news breaks, news happens, and you have to reflect on just how much of a train wreck they really were for the Bears. Case in point, Trevor Siemian recently visited with the Bears. Who knows if the Bears are planning on signing him to be a backup quarterback, but naturally, because he came in to visit, everybody immediately speculated as to whether Nick Foles will be traded or not. I want to read you this tweet from Greg Gabriel, former NFL scout for 30-plus years. Quote, "For those who think Foles will be traded, forget it. Not going to happen. He was just paid $4 million as a roster bonus. Part of his remaining contract is guaranteed for 2022. He's off the books after this year." End quote. A few days ago on Twitter, if you follow me at Jon Z Sports, I talked about the roster bonus. I said this was a parting gift from our good friend Ryan Pace. It really hurts me to know after all this time, all these changes for the Bears in the right direction, they're still tied and they're still committed, even worse, to Nick Foles. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult to find a trade partner for him. No one's going to want to pay that salary or that contract. I don't blame Ryan Foles. I blame Ryan Pace for that stupid move a couple years ago. Foles signed a 4-year, $60+ million deal, played 1 year, sucked in Jacksonville. And yet Ryan Pace thought to himself, you know what? It's a good idea if I bring him here. He'll do better here. Right, with Matt Nagy and the joke of the offense that the Bears had. And sure enough, he's done nothing of significance here in Chicago. Really. It's been a total waste of money, total waste of time. And even if he brought to the table some learning possibilities for Justin Fields, you really can't justify paying him that much money. You know, last year the Bears had $20 million tied up to backup quarterbacks, not even starters. $20 million paid out to Nick Foles and Andy Dalton. And they went 6-11. Talk about a cap nightmare. You want to talk about cap space and dead cap hits and why the Bears had no money to spend, all these things. Look at Ryan Pace paying out $20 million to 2 backup quarterbacks on his roster. Talk about ridiculous. Talk about irresponsible. Now, of course, he's gone. So if you ask me today, is Nick Foles going to be traded? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say no. Greg Gabriel is spot on in his analysis, and I echo the same sentiment. Some have said, well, hey, bring in Trevor Siemian to be a number 3. I have no problem with Trevor Siemian as a backup quarterback. One of the best in the game, in my opinion. Could even start if you need him to. Here's the problem, though. What are you going to do? Pay him and Nick Foles and then have to pay out Justin Fields on his rookie deal? Going to dedicate more cap space to backup quarterbacks? No. Unless Trevor Siemian's going to sign for $1 million or $2 million, which maybe he will, doesn't make any sense. Nick Foles is probably the most expensive backup in the NFL at this point. A $4 million roster bonus. Just so aggravating. What the hell did he do to deserve that? I know a lot of people like his resume. But in reality, he's had one good 6-game stretch that led to a Super Bowl. I remember Nick Foles when he came up, when he had that one good year, 28 touchdowns and 4 picks, something like that. Then he went to the Rams in St. Louis, sucked. Train wreck. Jacksonville, train wreck. He's had 2 good seasons, and the rest have been horrible. I mean, really bad. Like, not even competent NFL starting type player and starting type stats. No, it's been a train wreck. It's been horrible. Like around Justin Fields' rookie year. Even worse in some cases. I don't know what justifies him to get $4 million as merely a roster bonus, let alone what he's going to make next year in guaranteed money. Like Chase Daniel. Chase Daniel's made like what, $70 million in his career to start 4 or 5 games. Kudos to him and his agent, I guess. But for the Bears and for cap purposes and for personnel in general, this is stupid. And it just goes to show the mismanagement of Ryan Pace. This whole thing is a symbolization of Ryan Pace's mismanagement and stupidity when it comes to paying out players who don't deserve half of what they make. I don't care if Nick Foles won a Super Bowl 5 years ago. Today, he's a backup at best, maybe a number 3, as he was last year, making $4 million today for a roster bonus. Nobody's going to want to trade for him. You'd be stupid to do it. Take on the remaining part of that contract, which is guaranteed, and help out the Bears? No. You're going to make them suffer with that contract and with that player on your roster and on the bench. And if the Bears cut him, dead cap hit. They have to keep him around. I get he might be helpful for Justin Fields to learn, but then if that's what you're going to do with him, don't pay him that much money. It's not worth keeping Nick Foles around for this much money. I wish the Bears would find a trade partner, but I doubt it at this point. There's no way. Who's going to want to take on that contract? Who's going to want to take on paying some 33-year-old, career-long backup for the most part, all that money? Pay the roster bonus, and then have the Bears deal with the dead cap. Nick Foles today, if you traded him, would probably get maybe a 6th or 7th rounder, and that's being generous. 1, 2. That's if the Bears are lucky. It's just a horrible situation. All have been happening in part by Ryan Pace. This is his parting gift. He might have said, okay, you know what, you guys fired me fine, but I got something for you, something special. You'll love it. Right. Loving that the Bears are paying $4 million just for a roster bonus. And part of his contract being guaranteed for next year already. And if you try to trade him or release him, there's going to be dead cap. I don't understand why his contract is so hard to move. You know, we see all these big moves happening in the NFL, but for some reason, Nick Foles and his agent negotiated this sort of contract where it's so hard for him to be traded. Why does he want to stay here in Chicago? You know, he said last year, I remember this, I made a video about it too, oh, I deserve an opportunity and I want to choose where I'm traded. Who the hell are you? What have you done here? You might be revered in Philadelphia, and if you are, then go there. Go to Philadelphia. Take Jalen Hurts' job. You're going to lose it again in 5 weeks, like you did here. But don't think you're something big because you put up backup numbers in Chicago on top of it. This is what I don't like about Nick Foles, and I never liked that move to begin with. There were some who loved it, who said he would do better than Mitch Trubisky. He would not, and he didn't. And he's certainly not better than Justin Fields either. Not even close. Like, there's such a huge gap. I don't care about his resume. What I care about is right now. We're talking about right now. Maybe Nick Foles has had a better overall career than Justin Fields, Mitch Trubisky, Chase Daniel, Andy Dalton. But I'll tell you this much. When we're talking about today, would you rather have Justin Fields, a young gun, could do great, has a lot of potential, or Nick Foles, 33 years old, can't even throw the ball, and won a Super Bowl a couple years ago with luck more than anything? I had a feeling this would happen too last year when the Bears won that game against Seattle. and Foles played relatively well. I knew it. I knew he'd stick around for next year. That was just one game to prove and justify paying him this money now. That was the one game. It justified the whole thing. It's just one of the worst moves, actually. One of the worst moves by Ryan Pace. I mean it, too. One of the worst moves Ryan Pace made was trade, actually give up any sort of draft capital, even a 7th-round pick, 6th-round pick, for Nick Foles from Jacksonville, when he sucked and lost his job for Gardner Minshew. Lost it. Straight up. Not because of injury, not because of anything. Poor performance. Lost the job. And now, oh, hey, we'll bring in Nick Foles. Come on, we'll pay him the rest of his contract and make it so difficult to trade him. You know, when the Bears had Mark Sanchez here to teach Mitch Trubisky, remember in 2017, they didn't pay him an insane amount of money to do it. It was a minimum contract, 1 or 2 years. They treated him more so as a coach than a player. That was fine. If the justification is to keep Nick Foles around to teach Justin Fields, then reduce the salary, though. Reduce it. Make it $4 million just for the roster bonus plus what he's going to make next year. That is out of hand. And everybody could agree on that. Out of hand for a backup quarterback. You want to pay him the minimum, 2 years, $4 million, and a $1 million bonus? Fine. But the fact that he's making $10+ million to back up Justin Fields, and he's made that every single year to back up Mitch Trubisky and the other quarterbacks who've been in this team, that is way out there. Way too much money for Nick Foles. And the sense of entitlement's ridiculous. Like you said last year, I want to go where I want to go. No. You should be lucky you're even being scouted and teams watch you. You're old. You suck. So I want to dispel the myth today. You've heard rumors about Nick Foles or thought about, hey, maybe there's a chance. Probably not. The quarterback carousel has been spinning all offseason. I don't see any openings either, or a team who even needs him. Right now, Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo are begging for a team, begging for a starting spot. Tell you one thing, they're way better than Nick Foles, and they will find a job before Nick Foles does. Nick Foles now is a backup in the NFL. That's his new definition. And I don't see anybody wanting to pay $10 million for a backup, especially when a lot of these teams are paying $40 to $50 million for a starter. It's not worth the money. Plain and simple. I don't understand then why Trevor Siemian needs to even be looked at. Why not sign an undrafted free agent? Draft somebody in the 7th round. Keep him on your roster as your number 3. There's no need to have Trevor Siemian come in. And if you want to pay him a minimum salary, I guess it makes sense. I just don't get it. If you're already paying Nick Foles this much money, you can't move him. Why not sign an undrafted free agent or draft somebody in the late rounds and just have him sit on the roster then? If you're so worried about a number 3 quarterback, then do that instead. Again, I'm not blaming Brian Foles for any of this. He probably wants his own backup. Maybe he likes Trevor Siemian, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is more of an indictment and a blame on Ryan Pace. Still. And this is why I know nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to hear the name Ryan Pace again, or Matt Nagy. But when stuff like this comes up and we have to talk about Nick Foles and Ryan Pace go hand in hand. They do. Ryan Pace was the idiot who paid him that money and executed the trade. So we have to talk about it. And it's unfortunate. It just goes to show you why he should never be a GM again. Or unless he learns in Atlanta the true meaning of the salary cap and how to pay players and their market value. That's basic economics 101. Then maybe he'll get a second chance. But trading for Nick Foles from the Jaguars when he was benched for Gardner Minshew, paying out the rest of his contract, making it virtually impossible to trade him, and making the Bears pay out that money every year for a backup quarterback. And that's something you should have learned at college, Economics 101, or maybe when you were with the Saints even. How'd you not learn about this stuff? And why would you execute a trade for Nick Foles? You know, it's so funny. Look at the NFL this year. Look at all the trades happening. Matt Ryan, Baker Mayfield, Deshaun Watson. Wow. And then you look at the NFL 2 or 3 years ago. Oh, yeah, the Bears traded for Nick Foles. He'll compete, actually really compete. It's a serious competition between him and Mitchell Trubisky for the starting job. Wow. What a difference a couple of years make. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo might be on the move. Russell Wilson was traded, but 2 years ago, we're talking about here in Chicago. Hey, Nick Foles came in. Yes. I don't get it. And it really frustrates me to see, out of all people, Nick Foles collect this big a paycheck. Hey, if it was 2 or 3, even 4, $5 million a year, I wouldn't be mad. It's a backup quarterback. When you're making just a $4 million roster bonus, and the rest of your contract is guaranteed, when it becomes impossible to trade you, and no team wants you, you become a burden on the team you play for. He has become a burden for the Bears, a salary cap burden, and just a burden in general. They don't need him. There's no need for Nick Foles on this team. He even said last year, he wants to start somewhere, thinks he could play again. Great. If you think so, I know you're wrong, but if you think so, fine, then go. The contract's almost burdening him and the Bears. Burdening his career and the Bears with the salary cap. And nothing's changing. It's really, really unfortunate to see it play out like this. I would just hope that something happens, but I don't expect it. You heard what Greg Gabriel said, and I said the same thing. When they paid him that $4 million roster bonus, that means they're invested in him staying. You know, if you remember with the Matt Ryan trade, Atlanta asked to delay the roster bonus. They did. They didn't pay it to him. They traded him instead. They knew they were going to get rid of him. So they delayed the roster bonus by a couple of days. They never paid it to him, and they executed the trade before the bonus was owed. That is smart football. I guess Ryan Pace did learn something then, down in Atlanta. This isn't. And the Bears paid the roster bonus. Ryan Poles didn't want to lengthen it out or look for a partner. And I get it. It's not a priority. The Bears have so many other needs. We've talked about this. O-line, wide receiver, secondary. And they have a ton of needs. And I've been down the middle about how they've approached things in free agency. I know they want the draft. Fine. This may not be priority number one. And he does come off the books after this year. I guess I'm just frustrated as to how long he stayed, how for some reason he just can't be traded, and how much money he's earned, really stolen from the Bears, for doing nothing. And he's still here. He's done nothing. That is what frustrates me. So when I saw this Trevor Siemian news, and I saw everybody say, oh, that means they're trading Nick Foles, well, not so fast. That's the nature and the business side of the NFL. If the Bears do trade him, it's going to be a very good day for Chicago Bears fans and for Bears media, for me too. I'm going to come out and celebrate, but the fact is it's not looking like it. And once again, the Bears are going to pay a lot of money, an expensive rate for a backup quarterback. Shame on Ryan Pace. This is his legacy. It's not Mitch Trubisky. It's not Kevin White. I mean, those play a role. But really, his living legacy is Nick Foles, the stupid trade that he did to get him, and how the money that the Bears have to pay him to sit on the bench and do absolutely nothing. What a joke. Thanks for watching today's show here on BPod TV, channel 59.3 in Roku. Really appreciate the time. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Z Sports and on Facebook at Jon Zaghloul. Make sure you tune in every night right here at 10:30 on BPod TV. So long, everyone.